The galaxy of the 41st millennium is one of endless cruelty, and nowhere is this cruelty sharper than in the fate reserved for those who once called themselves soldiers of the Millennium, yet turned their guns upon the Imperium that birthed them. To betray the Emperor is to forfeit not only one's life, but one's very place in history. The Traitor Guard, as they are whispered of in sermons and etched into warnings, are more than renegades. They are living proof of the Imperium's most dreaded truth, that even the most disciplined mortal ranks, forged in duty and fire, may fracture into damnation. Their punishment is not swift. It is not merciful. It is drawn out across generations, etched into chains of labor, marked into flesh, and scattered across the stars as living warnings of what it means to forsake terror's light. Imagine soldiers who once stood beneath the banners of the Imperial Aquila, now reduced to hollow-eyed husks on penal worlds, their uniforms stripped, their weapons taken, their loyalty branded false. Imagine battalions forced into wars they cannot win, hurled into battle as expendable flesh against the enemies of mankind, their deaths serving not glory but atonement. And imagine too the cruel irony that in a galaxy without forgiveness, even death may not be the end of their punishment, for there are always darker masters waiting to claim their remains. Before we descend deeper into this journey, into the shadowed records of betrayal and torment, allow me a moment to step aside from the thunder of narrative. If you find resonance in these explorations of the grimdark, if you feel drawn further into the tragedies and revelations hidden in the margins of Warhammer's lore, then I invite you to lend strength to this work. Like, share, and subscribe, not as ritual, but as a way to ensure these stories continue to surface from the depths of forgotten tomes and whispered histories. In a universe where silence devours truth, your voice keeps the echo alive. Now, we turn to the heart of our descent, each chapter a layer of damnation, each chapter peeling back the thin veil between loyalty and betrayal, punishment and memory. It begins with silence, not the silence of peace, not the silence of rest, but the silence that falls after oaths are spoken and banners raised, when the din of war has not yet erupted but the burden of loyalty has already chained itself to the soul. Every soldier of the Astra Militarum learns this silence. It comes after the oath of service is sworn before a commissar, when the weight of the emperor's will settles into bone and marrow. The oath is iron, it is final, and it is meant to bind not just the soldier but their children, their entire bloodline, to the Imperium forever. It is more than promise, it is law. It is survival. It is the thin wall between humanity's continued existence and the endless darkness pressing upon it. And yet, across the countless worlds of the Imperium, there have always been cracks in this silence. Small fractures, invisible at first, forming under the weight of exhaustion, hunger, despair. They do not thunder with betrayal at the beginning. They whisper, they corrode, they take root in the vulnerable moments of soldiers who no longer believe their commanders see them as men and women at all, but as tools, as flesh to be thrown against Xenos or heretic until the body is ground away. The breaking of oaths is not one act, not one single decision. It is a slow collapse, a steady shattering of faith until the final act of betrayal feels less like rebellion and more like inevitability. Imagine a regiment of men conscripted from an agri-world, long stripped of harvest by tithe and war. Their hands once tilled soil, their backs bent beneath suns, and now they hold lasgons while their families starve. They march to war with promises of rations for their kin, only to learn upon deployment that the administratum has redirected their tithes to another world. The hunger in their veins festers into anger, the anger festers into silence, and in that silence, the oath begins to rot. No commissar's bolt pistol, no preacher's fiery sermon, can unmake the truth that the Imperium often forgets those who bleed for it. There are stories, hidden in the margins of regimental records, of companies that vanished in the dark between worlds. The official accounts declare them destroyed by orcs, swallowed by warp storms, lost in battle against the neck. But whispers persist that some chose to abandon their cause entirely, turning their transports away from Imperial battlefields and selling their lasguns to planetary warlords or pirate princes. Was it cowardice? Was it rebellion? Or was it merely survival, a desperate bid to live in a galaxy where survival itself is often heresy? To the Imperium, it does not matter. Any failure to die in the Emperor's name is betrayal. But the greatest tragedies are not those born of desperation, but of disillusionment. There are commanders who stood for decades at the front lines, leading soldiers into slaughter after slaughter, holding worlds for the Imperium that no longer even remembered their names. These commanders, men and women hardened by fire, looked to terror for acknowledgement, for relief, for honor, and found none. The bureaucracy of the administratum is a vast, blind machine, and in its grinding gears, entire regiments can be forgotten. Imagine fighting for 30 years without reinforcement, without resupply, without the simple recognition that you exist. Some did, and when the day came that their banners were torn and their officers executed for seeking surrender, those survivors did not see themselves as betrayers. They saw themselves as betrayed. The first fracture is always personal. It comes when a guardsman watches their commander eat while their squad starves. It comes when the Medicaid rationed the last stim to an officer instead of a dying trooper. It comes when a transport ship meant to evacuate the wounded leaves orbit early to save the nope. Each fracture is small, but oaths are not stone. They are glass. Once cracks begin, they spread, and when they spread far enough, they shatter all at once. The Imperium understands this truth, though it will never admit it. That is why the Commissariat exists not as mere officers of discipline, but as predators of loyalty, stalking their own ranks with bolt pistols and execution lists. The very need for commissars betrays the fragility of imperial oaths. If loyalty were unbreakable, there would be no need for a man to stand in the trench with his pistol pressed to the skull of the wavering. Yet, even with commissars, even with preachers screaming litanies of devotion and banners flying the Aquila, men and women still break. There was the tale of the Sindara 34th, who fought beneath a world of ash against the endless tide of orc warband. For 17 months, they held the trenches, lasguns charring green flesh by the thousands, artillery fire shaking the earth until it cracked like glass. When the last shells were gone and the orcs still poured forth, the commissars demanded the regiment charge with bayonets. The 34th obeyed beg, because that is what guardsmen do, but they found no salvation in the charge, only death. Those who lived to see the field piled with their comrades looked back upon the commissars and did not see leaders. They saw executioners. When the orcs finally surged over the trench line, those survivors turned their lasguns not against the Xenos but against their own officers, and the oath of the Sindara 34th shattered into dust. Yet betrayal does not always come in fire and fury. Sometimes it comes in silence, in disappearance, in the refusal to answer a regiment assigned to hold a manufacturing city might simply vanish one night. Their barracks emptied, their weapons stolen, their banners burned. Some flee into the underhive, joining cults that promise power and freedom. Others slip into the stars, their transport crews bribed or converted, their ships stolen. These are the ghosts of the Astra Militarum, the lost regiments, the unaccounted for, whose fates are sealed with a single word in the records: traitor. But the Imperium has no patience for nuance. To them, a soldier who breaks his oath is no different from a demon worshipper, no different from the alien, no different from the heretic. They are to be purged, their names erased, their families condemned. The oath is sacred, and once broken, it demands blood. And so, in the breaking of oaths, the fate of the traitor guard begins not as villains born, but as soldiers ground down by the very empire they once defended. Consider too the cruel irony. The Astra Militarum fights not for glory but because it must. Entire populations are conscripted in a single sweep of the administratum's pen. A farmer becomes a rifleman overnight. A factory worker becomes an artillery loader. None are asked, all are demanded. Their oath is not chosen, it is taken, and in that forced loyalty lies the seed of rebellion. What is loyalty worth if it was never freely given? And yet, when that loyalty breaks, the Imperium punishes it as if it were a deliberate betrayal. As if starvation, neglect, and despair were never factors at all. In some cases, the breaking of oaths is not betrayal at all, but entrapment. Soldiers captured in battle may be given a choice: rot in the torture cells of Xenos or heretics, or fight beneath their banners. Some resist until death, their oaths unbroken even in agony. Others, broken by pain and hopelessness, take up the weapons of their captors. To the Imperium, both fates are the same, both are traitors. Both will be remembered only in curses and warnings. But the truth is more complex. Some of these forced traitors found themselves wielding their new chains against the very Imperium that abandoned them, driven less by faith in their new masters than by hatred for the old. The stories of betrayal stretch across thousands of worlds, yet they all share one truth. The breaking of oaths is never sudden. It is always preceded by suffering, by neglect, by the weight of an empire too vast to care for the souls within it. In that neglect, oaths fracture. In that fracture, faith dies. And when faith dies, soldiers cease to fight for the emperor and begin to fight only for themselves. Thus begins the tale of the traitor guard. not as monsters, not as villains, but as men and women who once stood in the Emperor's light and found only shadow. The breaking of their oaths is the first step into an abyss that will consume them forever. For once the oath is broken, there is no return. There is only punishment, unending and merciless, waiting in the next chapter like a blade already raised. The oath once broken is never forgotten. In the eyes of the Imperium, it is not merely betrayal, it is a stain that seeps into bloodlines, a curse that marks not just the soldier, but their kin, their world, their very memory. When a regiment fractures, when an oath is abandoned, the punishment does not end with the traitors themselves. It extends outward, like fire spreading from a single spark, consuming all who stand too close. The Imperium is merciless because it must be, or so it claims, and in this mercilessness lies the fate of those who become known as the traitor. God, they are judged not as men or women but as examples, warnings written in flesh and ash, meant to remind all others of the price of disobedience. The punishment begins with silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of erasure. In the endless records of the Administratum, the name of a regiment is struck out, data's lates are amended, vox recordings are purged. On a world where a proud banner once flew, the banner is burned, the monuments torn down, the histories rewritten. Families are told nothing, or worse, they are told lies. An entire regiment may vanish from history with a single decree, and in its place remains only a whispered name, traitor. The first chain of judgment is the erasure of memory. For what is more terrifying than being denied even the dignity of being remembered? But silence alone does not satisfy the Imperium. It demands blood. Commissars are the executioners of this demand, their bolt pistols cold instruments of retribution. If a regiment shows even the faintest sign of hesitation, commissars act swiftly, gunning down officers and men alike to prevent the rot of betrayal from spreading further. To witness this is to see the Emperor's justice in its most brutal form, a man begging for mercy, promising loyalty, only for the trigger to be pulled and his skull reduced to fragments. The commissariat believes such acts preserve order, but for the survivors, they only plant seeds of fear. Fear, however, is the foundation of imperial loyalty. The Imperium thrives on it, nurtures it, and wields it like a blade. Those who live beyond the first execution rarely escape chains. Captured traitors are shackled, their armor stripped, their insignia carved away, their names replaced with numbers. They are paraded before the loyal, shown like animals in cages to remind the faithful of the gulf between loyalty and betrayal. Entire cities are made to watch as traitors are flogged, flayed, or burned alive, their screams carried through vox speakers so that every man, woman, and child might know the cost of faltering. Punishment becomes theater, suffering becomes spectacle, and in the suffering of the few, the loyalty of the many is hardened. But judgment does not always end in execution. Sometimes, the Imperium chooses a different punishment, consignment. Traitor regiments captured alive are not always destroyed outright. Instead, they are broken down, their companies scattered across penal legions. These legions are stripped of honor, stripped of identity, given nothing but explosive collars and lasguns with near-dead power packs. They are thrown into the most hopeless battles, into warp breaches and demon incursions, against orc tides and necron legions, with no expectation of survival. For every 10,000 men in a penal legion, perhaps 100 survive a campaign. Those survivors are not freed. They are simply sent again to the next war, and the next, until the last breath leaves their body. The chains of judgment are eternal. There are darker fates still. Some traitor guard are given over to the Inquisition. To be captured by the commissariat is death, but to be claimed by the Inquisition is something worse. The Inquisitors see in traitors both weakness and opportunity. A broken man may still be useful as bait, as test subject, as sacrifice. Rumors tell of entire companies handed to the Ordo Malleus, bound in chains and hurled into warp rifts to lure demons from hiding. Others speak of the Ordo Xenos using traitor regiments as fodder to study alien weapons, loosing them against Necron constructs or Tyrannid swarms to measure survival rates. These are not stories told openly, but they cling to the whispers of the guard. Warnings passed in hushed voices between men who fear not death but capture. Worse still are the fates reserved for those deemed irredeemable. For them, the Adeptus Mechanicus claims dominion. Stripped of flesh, their bodies are rebuilt into fetters, their minds scoured and replaced with circuits, their humanity consumed by wires and steel. A man who once swore his life to the Emperor may end it as nothing more than a mindless drone, soldering pipes in the bowels of a manufactorum or shoveling promethium ash into burning engines. All memory of self erased, In this way, the Imperium does not merely punish treachery, it recycles it, turning betrayal into utility, erasure into efficiency. And yet, amid all these punishments, the harshest chain is not the one placed upon the body, but the one placed upon the soul. The Ecclesiarchy teaches that those who betray the Emperor are damned forever, denied the Emperor's light, condemned to be devoured by demons when death finally claims them. Whether this is true or not, it becomes truth in the hearts of those who believe it. Imagine a soldier, once loyal, now branded traitor, sitting in his cell and hearing the litanies of damnation echo through the vox grills above. He does not fear execution. He fears eternity. He fears the thought that every breath he takes is another step toward being torn apart in the warp. The chain of judgment is eternal despair, binding not flesh but spirit, until even hope is consumed. Yet punishment breeds resistance. For every traitor executed, for every regiment erased, there are others who watch and whisper. They see not justice but cruelty. They see not loyalty preserved but humanity destroyed. And in that perception lies a paradox. The harsher the punishment, the more it ensures future betrayals. The Imperium knows this, but it cannot relent. To relent is weakness, and weakness invites destruction. So it continues the cycle, tightening the chains until blood runs freely, believing that fear will always outweigh defiance. But fear is a double-edged blade, and one day it cuts the hand that wields it. There is the story of the Garan 12th, who were branded traitors when their commander surrendered a city to Chaos forces in exchange for the lives of civilians. The commander was executed, the regiment broken, and those who survived were sent into penal legions. Yet within those legions, the men of the Garan 12th did not forget. They did not break. They carried their commander's memory with them, whispering his name like a prayer, believing him not traitor but martyr. And when the opportunity came, when a Chaos warband descended upon their penal legion, they did not fight for the Imperium. They fought for themselves. They seized the warband's weapons, slew their captors, and vanished into the void. No longer servants of terror, no longer servants of chaos, but soldiers free of chains. To the Imperium, they were damned. To themselves, they were finally alive. The chains of judgment, then, are not merely punishment. They are the crucible in which new rebellions are forged. Every execution, every erasure, every servitor built from traitor flesh becomes another reason for the living to question their loyalty. The Imperium believes it is eternal, but eternity is fragile when built on fear. The Traitor Guard are proof of this fragility. They are not born of chaos alone. They are born of the Imperium itself, of its neglect, its cruelty, its endless hunger for obedience. And so, the story of the Traitor Guard is not simply one of betrayal and punishment. It is one of cycles. The oath breaks, punishment falls, and from the ashes rise new traitors, carrying the scars of the chains with them. The Imperium calls them damned. The galaxy calls them dangerous. But perhaps the truth is more complicated. Perhaps the greatest danger they represent is not to the Imperium's armies, but to the Imperium's narrative that loyalty is unbreakable, that obedience is eternal, that the Emperor's will is absolute. The Traitor Guard are the proof that even the strongest chains can be broken, and that once broken, they cannot be reforged. As the silence of punishment fades into the screams of rebellion, the cycle turns once more. The chains may bind, but they also provoke, and in that provocation lies the next chapter of their fate, when chains become defiance, and punishment becomes fuel for vengeance. The first spark is never seen for what it is. At the moment of its birth, it looks like nothing more than a flicker, a stray ember caught on the wind, a whispered doubt in the barracks, a commissar who hesitates a fraction of a second before pulling the trigger, a mother who hides her son's name when the census stakers come, praying the administratum never learns he once bore the colors of a regiment branded traitor. It is in these smallest acts of defiance that rebellion is born, not with banners raised or armies marching, but with fear transmuted into fury, and silence into determination. The Imperium believes it can smother fire with punishment, that terror and execution will cauterize loyalty. It believes the bolt pistol and the lash will end the contagion of betrayal, and yet, history shows otherwise. For every regiment crushed, every line of records erased, something lingers. Men and women remember, families whisper, survivors refuse to forget, and when those memories fester long enough, they ignite. The Traitor Guard are not merely an accident of circumstance. They are inevitability made flesh. The fires of rebellion begin in the shadows, in forgotten places where the Imperium's grip falters, on hive worlds stripped bare by war, where ration lines snake for miles and the Munitorum shipments never arrive. In the Manufactura, where men work themselves to death for quotas no living body can sustain, their hands torn bloody on rusted steel as servitors shuffle past, indifferent. In the void ships, where conscripts huddle in the dark, listening to the hum of the warp and wondering why they should bleed for worlds they have never seen. These are the crucibles. This is where loyalty dies, not in some grand speech of defiance, but in the slow erosion of faith until nothing remains but rage. Consider the case of the Valoran 19th. They were shattered during a retreat, their officers executed, their banner burned, their regiment dissolved. Survivors were scattered into penal legions, their collars humming with explosives. But among them was a vox operator named Yaron Toll, a man who had once believed fiercely in the Emperor's will. He had carried orders through fire and smoke, watched friends die clutching lasguns drained of power. And yet, when his collar malfunctioned, when by some accident of fate he was left alive after his overseers detonated an entire company in punishment, he understood what his life had become. Not service, not honor, a tool, a disposable cog in a machine that devoured loyalty and excreted corpses. From that realization came resolve, and from resolve came rebellion. He whispered to the others. He told them that loyalty was a lie. He told them their deaths could mean more if they chose them, rather than waiting for the Imperium to press the button. The Valoran 19th remnants struck at their masters, seizing weapons, cutting collars from necks with bloodied blades, and vanishing into the night. The Imperium branded them damned, but they called themselves free. Rebellion, however, is not always a sudden strike. More often, it is slow kindling, built on decades of silence. Entire worlds grow resentful under the shadow of imperial judgment. Imagine a city where a regiment was once raised in honor, its name sung in cathedral hymns, its colors painted on the spires. Then imagine that regiment branded traitor, its name erased, its survivors executed. What remains of that city? Its people live under suspicion, their children treated as tainted, their leaders distrusted by the Every generation grows up under the accusation of guilt, until loyalty becomes an unbearable weight. Eventually, that weight cracks, and the people turn, not because they worship chaos, not because they sought rebellion, but because they have nothing left to lose. This is the soil in which rebellion grows best, despair tilled into rage, watered with silence, and harvested by those willing to strike back. There is a peculiar irony in the Imperium's punishments. The more it seeks to extinguish rebellion, the more it creates the conditions for it. By erasing regiments, it ensures they live on in whispered myth. By scattering survivors, it spreads seeds of rebellion across worlds and legions. By punishing families, it ensures resentment bleeds through generations. The Imperium's judgment is not a wall against treachery, but a forge for it, hammering men into rebels as surely as any chaos cult might. And yet, rebellion among the traitor guard is not always unified. Fire does not burn in clean lines. Some regiments turn to chaos, surrendering themselves to the promises of gods who offer freedom from the Emperor's chains. Others reject both the Imperium and the warp, becoming mercenaries, raiders, pirates in the void, living by plunder and chance. Still, others cling to their own banners, reinventing themselves as free armies, convinced they are the last true heirs of loyalty betrayed. This fragmentation is what allows the Imperium to endure. For, were the traitor guard ever united, they would be a storm no segmentum could withstand. But unity is rare in rebellion. Fire spreads unevenly, consuming some, sparing others. Always unpredictable that there are tales whispered in the dark of the void reef. A coalition of scattered traitor guard remnants who banded together after surviving 3 different penal campaigns. They painted their armor black and crimson, bearing no insignia but the marks of their chains carved into their shoulders. They struck at Munitorum convoys, freed other penal legions, and for a brief moment carved out a shadow empire on the fringes of Segmentum. For years, they burned across the stars, a living reminder that judgment could not erase defiance. In the end, the Imperium crushed them with overwhelming force, sending 3 whole Space Marine chapters to obliterate their strongholds. The Void Reavers were annihilated, their leaders executed, their names scrubbed from records, and yet, their legend survives. In hushed whispers among the guard, their name is still spoken not as heroes, perhaps, but as proof that fire, once kindled, cannot be forever extinguished. The fires of rebellion are not only physical, they burn in the realm of belief. The ecclesiarchy preaches damnation, but some rebel regiments form their own liturgies, their own prayers. They speak of the Emperor not as a god of chains, but as a martyr betrayed by those who claim to serve him. They pray not for salvation, but for vengeance. In this way, rebellion becomes not just survival, but ideology. Once men begin to believe they are the true loyalists, punished for sins they did not commit, their defiance becomes unshakable. A man who fights for his life can be broken. A man who fights for his belief cannot. And yet, rebellion carries its own curse. The fires that consume loyalty often consume humanity as well. Traitor regiments who begin in righteous defiance may end in blood-soaked tyranny, their leaders becoming the very monsters they once despised. The Garan 12th, who once fought to honor their executed commander, eventually became slavers, taking captives to fuel their wars, their ideals lost in the hunger for power. The Valeran 19th, who had risen from the ashes of penal servitude, vanished into the eye of terror, their descendants now chanting the names of gods they once denied. Rebellion burns, but fire is indifferent. It destroys as much as it liberates. Still, there are moments when rebellion achieves what nothing else can, a fleeting glimpse of freedom. On the mining world of Kirel, where an entire population was condemned for harboring survivors of a traitor regiment, the people rose up. They armed themselves with mining tools, with loss cutters and crude explosives, and they drove the Arbites from their streets. For 3 days, the city was free. The Imperial Aquila was torn down, its stone wings shattered. And for the first time in generations, the people spoke openly of their dead. They told their children the names of fathers and brothers who had been branded traitors. They remembered. For 3 days, they were more than subjects of the Imperium. They were human, and when the retribution came, when orbital fire rained down and the city was reduced to glass, the survivors whispered that those 3 days were worth more than a lifetime of chains. Rebellion, then, is not measured in victories. It is measured in sparks. The Imperium counts success by eradication, by worlds burned and regiments crushed. The Traitor Guard measures success by defiance. By every moment they deny the chains of judgment. By every life lived outside the Imperium's reach, even if only for a heartbeat. The fires they kindle may not consume the galaxy, but they ensure the galaxy never truly belongs to Terra, and so the cycle continues. The chains of judgment fall, the sparks of rebellion rise, the fire consumes, and the Imperium rebuilds the pyres to burn it down again. Neither side wins, neither side yields. It is an endless war fought not on battlefields alone, but in memory, in silence, in the fragile flame of defiance that no bolt pistol can extinguish. The Imperium will never admit this truth, but it fears rebellion more than it fears Xenos or demons. For Xenos and demons are external enemies, things to be killed, things to be purged. Rebellion is the enemy within, the rot in the heart, the proof that loyalty can fail, and if loyalty can fail once, it can fail again. The Traitor Guard embody that truth, and so long as they exist, the fires of rebellion will never be quenched. The sparks grow, the flames spread. The Imperium answers with more chains, more judgment, more silence. But silence cannot bury memory forever, and judgment cannot kill every survivor. In the end, the fires of rebellion do not need to win, they only need to endure, and endure they do, burning across centuries, across stars, across the endless night of the 41st millennium. Vengeance does not arrive as a storm in the distance. It creeps, it waits, it festers like a wound left untreated. For the Traitor Guard, rebellion is a fire that flares and gutters, a desperate cry against chains. But vengeance is different. It is slower, colder, more deliberate. If rebellion is born from pain, vengeance is born from memory of executions carried out in the name of loyalty, of families erased, of comrades branded traitor when all they did was survive. The Imperium calls them cowards, oathbreakers, the damned. But in the hearts of those who endured judgment and kindled rebellion, a single conviction grows. The Imperium will bleed as they have bled. There are whispers in the penal camps, passed between shackled soldiers as the overseers turn their backs. Not all speak of escape, some speak of retribution. They recall the names of commissars who executed officers without trial, of munitorum clerks who condemned regiments with the flick of a quill, of cities that turned on their own kin at the first rumor of treachery. The names are remembered, spoken like curses, and in the silence of the night, vengeance becomes prayer. For valor, for Chiral, not for chaos, not for freedom, for vengeance. The Imperium believes vengeance belongs to the Emperor, his justice administered through holy flame and bolter. But vengeance is not loyal, it does not serve thrones, it serves itself, and it feeds on everything it touches. The Traitor Guard, once broken, once desperate, begin to draw strength from that hunger. Their rebellions no longer fight only to survive. They strike back, carefully, deliberately. with the cold precision of soldiers who once wore the Aquila and know exactly where to cut. The first blows are small. Munitorum supply lines are ambushed in the dead of night. Vox stations are seized and their operators executed. Messages of loyalty replaced with broadcasts of names long forbidden. Penal legions turn their collars against their masters, detonating overseers with the very devices meant to control them. Garrisons burn. Administratum outposts vanish. To the High Lords, these are statistical losses, anomalies in the endless tide of war. But to those who remember, each act is not random, it is vengeance. Consider the fall of the bastion of Once a proud fortress of the Astra Militarum, it became a penal stockade after housing a regiment branded Traitor. For decades, its walls rang with screams as executions were carried out, overseers stamping out every whisper of resistance. But vengeance waited. When a shipment of new prisoners arrived, remnants of 3 different condemned regiments, they brought with them not despair, but a plan. The power conduits beneath the bastion were mapped, the patrols counted, the weapons caches memorized, and on the feast of the Emperor's Ascension, when the chapel bells rang and the overseers gathered to chant litanies of loyalty, the prisoners struck, power failed, doors opened, and collars detonated, not on necks, but in guard barracks. The bastion burned for 3 days, its towers falling into ruin. When the smoke cleared, banners of the condemned flew where the Aquila once stood. It was not rebellion, it was retribution. What makes vengeance so dangerous is not its violence, but its focus. The Traitor Guard do not strike blindly. They know the Imperium's weaknesses because they once served it. They know the roots of the Munitorum, the rhythms of the Ecclesiarchy, the protocols of the Astra. They know where the hammer will fall, and they move before it does. Entire star systems have seen vengeance rise not as chaos, but as surgical strikes, calculated to bleed the Imperium in its most vital arteries. And yet vengeance is never pure. It devours those who wield it. The Traitor Guard who rise as avengers often find themselves becoming monsters. Their justice is no longer measured against guilt, but against opportunity. An Arbit's precinct that once carried out executions is burned, but so too are the families who lived within its walls. A commissar who ordered mass punishment is hunted, but so too are the conscripts who once followed his command. Vengeance spreads, consuming the innocent along with the guilty, until justice and cruelty are indistinguishable. The Imperium uses this corruption to its advantage. In propaganda broadcasts across hive cities and frontier worlds, picked feeds show the atrocities of the Traitor Guard. Massacres, burned cathedrals, butchered civilians. The Ecclesiarchy thunders from pulpits that these are the wages of betrayal, proof that vengeance is merely the mask of chaos. For many, it works, but for others, those who have suffered the weight of imperial judgment, the propaganda rings hollow. They see not monsters, but men who refuse to kneel. And for every act of vengeance the Imperium condemns, there are those who silently applaud. There is a tale, half rumor, half truth, of the Knight of Ashen Wings. On a forge moon orbiting the Adeptus Mechanicus had turned condemned regiments into stripping their flesh and wiring their bones into machines of endless labor. The survivors who escaped swore they would return. Decades later, they did. Cloaked in silence, their ships descended, wings black against the stars. They cut through the Mechanicus defenses with fury born not of desperation but of hatred. And when they reached the manufacturer where their brothers had been reduced to mindless drones, they did not destroy it with explosives. They burned it slowly, methodically, feeding promethium into its veins until the very ground cracked with fire. Every servitor was destroyed, every overseer crucified on the spires. It was vengeance, pure and absolute. And for generations the Forge Moon remained a black scar in the void. But vengeance is not only external, it festers within. Traitor regiments turn on one another, accusing rivals of cowardice or betrayal, punishing their own with the same cruelty they once suffered. The cycle repeats, vengeance feeding on itself, ensuring that even in their rebellion the Traitor Guard cannot find peace. For some, this self-destruction becomes ritual. Entire warbands carve the names of their executed officers into their flesh, fighting not for victory but to die with vengeance fulfilled. The galaxy becomes littered with graves that are not graves at all, but monuments of anger, each one a warning that no chain can bind forever. And yet amid all this horror, vengeance carries a strange beauty. In the quiet after a raid, when the smoke clears and the stars burn cold above, there are moments when vengeance feels like justice. A soldier who once watched his comrades executed by commissars now stands free, his captors dead, his banner raised again. For him, vengeance is not cruelty, it is dignity reclaimed. the proof that he was not broken. These moments are fleeting, but they are powerful enough to endure in memory, carried through generations like torches in the dark. Still, vengeance is unsustainable. Fire burns bright, but it consumes its fuel quickly. The traitor guard who devote themselves to vengeance are often their fury leading them into wars they cannot win, their hunger pushing them into the arms of chaos gods who promise endless retribution. And so the cycle twists again, from rebellion to vengeance, from vengeance to damnation. The Imperium knows this, and it waits. It knows the fire will burn itself out, leaving only ashes. But what the Imperium fails to see is that ashes carry embers. Even when vengeance destroys itself, its memory lingers, ready to ignite again in those who remember. The Garan 12th may be gone, the Void Reavers annihilated, the Bastion of Navarra's reduced to rubble, but their stories remain, whispered in barracks and mining camps, in the shadows of hive cities, in the corners of void. Stories of vengeance fulfilled, stories that remind the living that chains can be broken, that judgment can be answered, that the Imperium bleeds. And in these stories lies the true danger. The Imperium can kill men, it can burn worlds, it can erase records, but it cannot silence memory. Memory becomes story, story becomes myth, and myth becomes fire once more. The Traitor Guard do not need to win, they only need to endure, to remind the galaxy that the Imperium is not eternal, that vengeance is always waiting in the shadows, that as vengeance burns itself out, as ashes scatter into the void, another hunger begins to stir. Rebellion seeks freedom, vengeance seeks retribution, but there is a third hunger, darker still, that grows in the hearts of the betrayed, the hunger for power. From the ruins of vengeance rise warlords who no longer fight for justice or survival, but for dominion, and in their rise, the fires of rebellion become something far more dangerous, an empire of traitors, forged not by loyalty or faith, but by the will to conquer. The fires of vengeance rarely end in embers, they burn men hollow, they scorch regiments until nothing remains but ash and hate. Yet from those ashes, something darker always rises, not freedom, not justice, not peace, but ambition. Among the countless traitor guards scattered across the galaxy, there are always those who will not be content with rebellion alone. They take up the mantle of command not because it was given, but because they seize it. They gather the broken, the exiled, the furious, and they forge them into new legions. These are the warlords of the damned, the generals of ruin who turn scattered vengeance into calculated empire. Their rise is never glorious. There are no parades, no thunderous declarations. It begins in blood-soaked mud, among men too starved to lift their rifles. It begins with a soldier who survives when all others fall, with a commander who refuses to die, with a voice that cuts through despair and demands obedience. In the vacuum left by shattered chains, authority reasserts itself, not imposed from the Imperium, but born from the will of the damned. And once one man or woman stands unchallenged, a warlord is born. Consider the story of Malrek Vayner, once a captain of the 112th Cadian who watched his regiment branded traitors for retreating before a tyrannid swarm too vast for mortal flesh to resist. The commissar executed his superior officers, and Malrek was dragged in chains to a penal colony. But when the colony revolted, it was his voice the men followed, his rifle that shot the first overseer, his hand that raised the first banner of rebellion. Within months, he commanded not prisoners, but an army. They named him the Iron Shade, for he wore the blackened remains of his penal collar as a mark of defiance. His vengeance burned hot, but it did not consume him. He wanted more. He wanted to carve out a dominion where no commissar's word could damn his people again. He wanted to rule. Warlords like Malrek turned scattered fury into strategy. They seize void ships, they fortify strongholds, they claim entire worlds as bastions of their rebellion. Their followers obey not only out of loyalty, but because they know no other hope. Under a warlord's command, the traitor guard cease to be hunted fugitives. They become conquerors. The galaxy, already bleeding from countless wars, becomes fertile ground for their ambitions. Frontier worlds too distant for imperial reinforcements fall swiftly. Outposts crumble. Administratum officials vanish. What was once rebellion becomes occupation, and what was once vengeance becomes law. The Imperium brands them heretics, but within their own dominions, these warlords carve hierarchies as rigid as any imperial doctrine. Penal veterans are promoted to officers, their scars worn as medals. Overseers who once held the lash are broken and paraded as slaves. The fallen Aquila is replaced with banners painted in blood, sigils of defiance that proclaim the birth of something new. Some adopt the trappings of chaos, their armies daubed in marks of the dark gods. Others cling to a twisted echo of the Imperium, insisting they are the true heirs of humanity betrayed by Terra's arrogance. Both are dangerous, for both draw strength from conviction, yet no warlord rules unchallenged. The galaxy itself conspires against them. Rival Traitor guard legions clash, their ambitions colliding like stormfronts. One warlord seeks dominion over a system, another claims it as his inheritance, and armies of the damned slaughter one another in wars that stain the stars. Those who serve chaos quickly draw the gaze of demons and dark champions, who arrive not as allies but as rivals, demanding fealty or offering annihilation. Those who resist chaos are no safer, for the Imperium's retribution is relentless, its Astra Militarum regiments and Adeptus Astartes chapters descending with holy fire to scour every outpost, every fortress, every world that dares defy the throne. The cycle is endless. Rebellion, vengeance, dominion, destruction. But within the brief lifespan of their reigns, the warlords of the damned leave scars that cannot be erased. Worlds are broken not only by fire, but by the memory of what was seen. Men once loyal to the Emperor standing in defiance, commanding armies, wearing the masks of rulers. To the citizens of those worlds, the message is clear: if the Emperor's chosen can fall, then loyalty is not eternal. Doubt seeps into the edges of Imperial faith, a poison far subtler and far more enduring than any chaos incursion. One of the most infamous dominions rose in the Vadras cluster, where a warlord known only as Coldrith carved out an empire from 5 worlds. He had once been an artillery officer, condemned when his regiment fired on retreating guardsmen. In exile he forged a weapon of his own making, an army of penal survivors who worshipped him as their savior. Coldrith ruled not with fear alone, but with vision. He promised his soldiers not only vengeance, but a future lands to farm, homes to raise, children to protect. And for a time, it seemed real. The worlds under his banner flourished in defiance, trade flowing, soldiers trained, families thriving. The Imperium branded them heretics, but they lived, until the Inquisition arrived. Coldrith's worlds burned in a single campaign. Ordo Hereticus, fleets descended, accompanied by Sisters of Battle who leveled cathedrals of false worship with holy fire. The Astra Militarum retook the strongholds brick by brick, bleeding oceans of lives to stamp out his dream. When Coldrith was finally captured, he was paraded through the streets of his capital, bound in chains, his followers forced to watch as his body was burned alive in the square. His empire was reduced to ash, and yet, even in death, his legend survived. For the men who once followed him, Coldrith had given them a taste of freedom, a vision of life beyond chains. The Imperium destroyed his body, but it could not destroy the idea he had seeded, that the damned could rule. Every warlord is different, but they are bound by a single truth. They are born of betrayal. The Imperium creates them as surely as it destroys them. Each unjust execution, each massed punishment, each branded regiment becomes fertile soil for the rise of another. And though the Imperium boasts of its victories, though its propaganda proclaims every warlord crushed, the reality is darker. For every one slain, another rises, and for every empire burned, another takes root. What is most terrifying is how quickly these dominions begin to mirror the Imperium itself. Warlords who once cursed commissars now appoint their own, enforcing loyalty through the barrel of a gun. Those who railed against the Munitorum now demand exacting tithes from their subjects. Those who cursed the chains of terror now bind their own soldiers and collars, ensuring obedience through the same cruelty they once defied. In their hunger for power, the damned become reflections of their oppressors, and so the cycle continues. A grim parody of the Imperium repeating itself in shadow. There are stories whispered among inquisitors that some warlords dream not of rebellion, nor vengeance, nor even dominion, but of empire that rivals Tara itself. In these whispers, the Traitor Guard are not simply exiles, but architects of a new Imperium, one forged in the image of their betrayal, free of Terra's corruption. These whispers are not spread in the open, for to speak them aloud is heresy beyond comprehension. Yet they persist, like a song carried in silence, reminding the Imperium that its greatest enemy may not be alien or demon, but its own reflection. The warlords of the damned stand as monuments to this truth. They are not outsiders. They are not aliens. They are humanity's own soldiers, turned against the throne. Their strength lies not in alien sorcery or demon pacts, but in their knowledge of the Imperium itself, its weaknesses, its hypocrisies, its cruelty. And for as long as the Imperium demands absolute obedience, there will always be those who defy, who rise, who rule. Yet no warlord is eternal. Some fall to chaos, their empires dissolving into madness and mutation. Others are annihilated by imperial crusades, their names struck from records, their banners consigned to ash. Still others are betrayed by their own, cut down by lieutenants hungry for power. The galaxy remembers them not for their victories, but for the shadows they cast. Their legacies are scars, carved into worlds and into memory. Proof that rebellion does not end in silence. And in the silence after their fall, one truth remains. The damned are never destroyed. They are recycled, reforged, reborn. From rebellion to vengeance, from vengeance to dominion, the cycle endures. The Imperium can win every battle, burn every fortress, purge every world, and still, somewhere in the void, another warlord waits, gathering strength, sharpening hatred, preparing to rise. As the ashes of Coldrith's empire scatter into the void, as the Iron Shade's banners fade into forgotten ruins, the question becomes not whether the warlords will rise again, but when, for the Imperium breeds them with every judgment, every lash, every unjust decree. And when the next warlord comes, when the next dominion rises, the galaxy will once more tremble under the weight of a truth the Imperium dares not admit. Its greatest enemy is the one it creates itself. The warlords of the damned are not the end of the story. They are the hinge upon which the fate of traitors turns. For beyond ambition lies something darker still, a hunger that no dominion, no throne, no banner can satisfy. The hunger for damnation, not as rebellion, not as vengeance, not even as power, but as destiny. From their ashes rise those who embrace chaos fully, not as servants but as chosen. And in them, the traitor guard cease to be rebels or warlords. They become legions of the abyss. There comes a point in every rebellion when the banners of defiance begin to rot. Colors fade, mottos lose their meaning, and the proud slogans that once stirred men to action become hollow echoes. For the traitor guard, this moment of reckoning does not end their march. Instead, it drags them deeper into a mire that was waiting all along. For beyond vengeance, beyond dominion, beyond warlords and their false thrones, there lies the final inheritance of the damned. The chains of chaos. Chaos does not come to the traitor guard as an army storming the gates or a thunderclap from the warp. It seeps, it whispers. It emerges in the quiet moments when soldiers kneel to bury their comrades and wonder if any god watches them. It reveals itself when an officer prays not to the emperor, but to any power that will hear him. It takes root when desperation twists into faith, when rebellion hardens into creed. And once that root is planted, it spreads faster than fire across dry fields. There is no single path into chaos. For some, it begins with survival. A regiment cornered on a battlefield, supplies gone, ammunition dwindling, prays for deliverance. When a storm descends upon their enemies, when their foes inexplicably falter, the soldiers whisper thanks to something unseen. Later, they realize it was no coincidence, but a gift. And gifts, once accepted, demand loyalty. For others, it begins with hunger for power. A warlord who has tasted conquest finds that his victories falter, his enemies press harder, his own men grow restless. Then comes the emissary, a sorcerer draped in filth, a cultist clothed in fire, a demon whispering through the voxgrillen with them an offer. Strength beyond flesh, dominion beyond steel, loyalty that no rebellion can shake. The warlord takes the hand, and in that handshake, he sells his soul. Once chaos is embraced, it does not remain hidden. At first, it is subtle, a soldier whose eyes gleam with unnatural light, a weapon that never seems to miss, a wound that heals too quickly. Then it spreads. Flesh twists, banners warp into living things, stitched with symbols that burn the eyes. Songs of rebellion are replaced with chants in tongues older than humanity. The traitor guard cease to be men bound by shared injustice. They become vessels, puppets, fodder. Their chains are reforged not in iron, but in faith. The most infamous example is the Legion of Ashen Chains, a regiment once known as the 34th Dravoke Infantry, abandoned during a chaos incursion, branded cowards by the Imperium. They fought on alone for years until desperation hollowed them out. When the dark apostle of the word-bearers found them, he did not need to persuade. He offered them meaning. He offered them the assurance that their suffering had purpose. They took it with open arms. Within months, they were unrecognizable. Chains wrapped their armor, inscribed with runes of binding. Their faces were hidden by helms that fused to their flesh. They marched not as men, but as penitents, chanting in time with their shackles, each link a promise to the gods they now served. They had sought freedom from terror, but in chaos they found only chains heavier than any commissar's decree. The tragedy of the chains of chaos is not that the damned are devoured, It is that they believe themselves delivered. Soldiers once bitter against the Emperor now proclaim themselves chosen of higher powers. Officers who cursed commissars now kneel willingly before sorcerers and demons. Their rebellion is not extinguished, but redirected. Where once their fury was aimed at terror, now it is offered as tribute to the warp. They exchange one tyranny for another, and they call it salvation. The four great gods offer different chains, but each binds just as tightly. To Khorne, the blood god, they give their rage, their hunger for slaughter. Regiments that once fought for survival now become engines of endless war. Their banners dripping with gore, their officers crowned in skulls. They lose themselves in the rhythm of bloodshed, never questioning, never resting, only killing. To Nurgle the Plague Father, they surrender their despair. He answers with false comfort, turning their wounds into gifts, their decay into strength. They become shuffling hordes of filth, their laughter hollow but sincere. Convinced that rot is mercy, to Dizench the changer of ways, they offer their ambition, their thirst for control. He twists it into sorcery, into labyrinths of lies, until they are lost within schemes not their own. And to Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, they give their cravings, their unchained desires. What began as rebellion against restraint becomes worship of indulgence. Their lives consumed by a spiral of pleasure that ends only in death or damnation. Even those who claim no god find no freedom. They are claimed by the Great Eye itself, by chaos undivided, their banners daubed in runes that mark them as belonging to the abyss. They chant not the name of a single master, but the chorus of all. Their chains are not singular, but manifold, and in that manifold, they are lost. The Imperium speaks of these regiments with hatred, branding them heretics, abominations, filth. But within the echoing silence of the damned, there is a deeper tragedy. These soldiers are not aliens, they are not demons born of the warp. They are humanity's own, forged in the fires of loyalty, broken by betrayal, and finally consumed by the very forces the Imperium claimed to protect them from. They are a mirror held to terror's face, and what it reflects is unbearable. For every regiment that falls into chaos, the story is the same: betrayal, vengeance, dominion, corruption. The cycle is relentless, and the chains are unbreakable. Once taken, they cannot be shed. Those who try are punished. Warlords who regret their bargains find their flesh unravels, their bones liquefy, their souls are dragged screaming into the abyss. Soldiers who falter are torn apart by their own brothers, their blood offered as sacrifice to strengthen the pact. There is no going back. Once the chains of chaos close, they remain until death and often beyond. There are whispers among the Inquisition of Traitor Guard regiments that fight long after their bodies should have crumbled, bound by chains of will that refuse to release them. Ghost legions of the damned, marching through void-shattered battlefields, chanting hymns to gods that hunger. Their corpses are animated not by life, but by faith, twisted into shackles. To face them is to face not soldiers, but an idea made flesh, the idea that no rebellion ends in freedom, only in bondage. And yet, for all the horror, for all the grotesque spectacle, the Imperium fears something deeper, that these regiments chose their fate, that in the moment of decision, they did not resist. They did not beg for salvation. They embraced it. They wanted the chains. Because in chains, there is certainty. In chains, there is belonging. In chains, there is the promise that their suffering was not in vain. This is the cruelest truth of the traitor God. They do not fall because they are weak. They fall because they are human, and humanity, stripped of hope, will grasp any hand that offers mini heaven if that hand drags them into the abyss. The chains of chaos are not iron, nor steel, nor fire. They are faith, twisted into bondage. They are hope, reshaped into servitude. They are rebellion, transmuted into worship. And once they close, the damned are lost forever. The question is not why they fall. The question is how many more will follow. For every battlefield abandoned, for every regiment branded heretic, for every soldier left to die, another link is forged. And in the end, the galaxy will drown not in the armies of aliens, nor in the teeth of demons, but in the endless march of its own sons and daughters, shackled by chains they chose, chanting hymns to masters they cannot see, believing themselves free while they are bound forever. And so the story turns, from rebellion to vengeance, from vengeance to dominion, from dominion to corruption. The wheel completes another cycle, yet it does not end, for in the depths of damnation, something stirs. From the ashes of chains comes fire, and from fire comes war that no Imperium, no warlord, no god can truly contain. The chains of chaos are not the conclusion. They are the prelude. For the final inheritance of the Traitor Guard is not bondage, but a destiny darker still, the destiny of endless war, where chains become weapons and damnation becomes a banner. There is no silence like the silence after betrayal, no void more suffocating than the space left when faith has been burned away and loyalty has been devoured. For the Traitor Guard, whose journey began in rebellion and spiraled into vengeance, dominion, and finally into the chains of chaos itself, there is still one chapter left to endure. It is not triumph, it is not even annihilation, it is punishment, tendless, unrelenting, and absolute. Punishment comes in many forms, and for the damned soldiers of the Guard, it is a kaleidoscope of horrors. Some of these punishments are inflicted by the Imperium, carried out with cold precision by commissars, inquisitors, and the deathless custodians who hunt them across stars. Others are meted out by the very gods they served, who see in their mortal pawns only fuel to be burned, never sons to be cherished. Still others come from within, from comrades turned executioners, from warlords who cannibalize their own legions, from whispers that drive men into madness until their punishment becomes self-inflicted. In every form, it carries the same truth. There is no end to their torment. The Imperium has no mercy for the Traitor Guard. To be branded heretic is to be stripped not only of life, but of history. Records are purged, names erased, bloodlines marked for extermination. When the Astra Militarum discovers a regiment has fallen, they do not speak of redemption. They send orders for They send the Officio Assassinorum, its killers moving like shadows through the darkness. They send the Inquisition, whose fleets burn entire systems to ensure no trace remains. For the Imperium, punishment is not just death, it is erasure. It is the denial that these soldiers ever existed. But the irony, and the cruelty, is that such annihilation rarely succeeds. Even when planets burn, even when entire sectors are silenced, the Traitor Guard persist. Their punishment is survival, because survival itself means another war, another chain, another scream. On the other side, the gods of chaos are no gentler masters. For a time, the Traitor Guard believed themselves chosen. They marched beneath the banners of Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, or Slaanesh, believing their offerings of blood, rot, secrets, and excess will be rewarded. But the gods do not cherish them. They strip them bare. Khorne takes their fury until they are husks, killing without thought until their skulls are added to his throne. Nurgle fills their bodies with pestilence until they can no longer remember the face of life beneath the rot. Tzeentch twists their ambitions until they become pawns in labyrinths they cannot escape. Slaanesh devours their cravings until nothing is left but a hollow scream echoing forever. The punishment of chaos is worse than death. It is consumption. It is to be remade as fuel, to march, to kill, to rot, to hunger forever without reprieve. Even the warlords who rise among the Traitor Guard cannot escape punishment. Those who seize dominion soon discover that power in the eye of terror is a crown of knives. Rivals stalk them with poisoned words and sharper blades. Sorcerers whisper prophecies of their downfall while demons demand blood prices for every victory. Their punishment is paranoia, a throne of skulls built atop shifting sand, knowing that betrayal is not only possible, but inevitable. And when it comes, when their legions turn on them, or their gods withdraw their favor, they fall screaming into obscurity, their names forgotten, their dreams devoured. But perhaps the greatest punishment comes not from outside, but from within. The Traitor Guard are haunted by memory. Memory of the homeworlds they left behind, the comrades they buried, the oaths they once swore. Some carry relics of the past, a locket from a wife, a scrap of parchment with an oath to the Emperor, a data slate recording of a child's laughter. These fragments, once cherished, become brands upon their souls. In the quiet moments between battles, they look upon them and feel the gulf between who they were and what they have become. That gulf is punishment enough. It is not a commissar's bolt round or a demon's claw that breaks them. It is the whisper of what they once were. It is the realization that they traded their humanity for chains, and that those chains will never break. Legends tell of the Crimson Penitents, a regiment that once fought valiantly in the service of the Imperium before their commander turned to chaos. When the Imperium learned of their fall, they unleashed the Exorcist's chapter of Space Marines to cleanse them. The battle was swift, brutal, and absolute. But when the last of the regiment fell, something remarkable occurred. Their souls did not scatter into the warp. They remained bound together, shackled by the chains of their betrayal. Now, it is said, they march as spectral soldiers, their eyes hollow flames, their voices a chorus of lament. They fight for no banner, no master, no god. They are punishment embodied, doomed to fight forever in the no man's lands of the Eye of Terror. killing and being killed in an endless cycle, unable to die, unable to rest. There are darker whispers still. Some say that the Emperor himself, seated upon the golden throne, remembers every Traitor Guard regiment, that within the infinite radiance of his sacrifice, there are black scars, each one a reminder of the soldiers who abandoned his light, and that their punishment is to be remembered eternally, not forgiven, not forgotten, but held forever as wounds within his soul. Whether this is truth or merely the liturgy of the Ministorum, none can say, but the idea itself is enough to drive some Traitor Guard into despair, to know that even in damnation, even in the warp, their betrayal is not lost but preserved, like a wound that never heals. Punishment is also ritual. In the dark holds of chaos warships, soldiers kneel in chains while their officers carve sigils into their flesh. Each scar is a promise, each brand a debt. They chant prayers not for salvation, but for endurance, begging their gods to allow them one more day of life so they may kill again. In their voices there is no joy, no triumph, only desperation. They are punished not only by their enemies, but by their own survival. For the cruelest punishment is not death, it is to live on, to march again, to suffer endlessly with no hope of release. It would be a mistake to think that punishment breaks them. The truth is far more dreadful. Punishment reforges them. It strips away hesitation, pity, doubt. It leaves only zeal, only fury, only obedience. The more they are punished, the more fanatical they become. The more chains are wrapped around them, the louder they chant. The more their gods consume them, the more fervently they worship. Punishment does not end them, it perfects them. It transforms them from rebels into eternal instruments of damnation. And yet, despite the cruelty, despite the endless torment, there remains a glimmer of something unnameable. Not hope, it is far too late for that. Not redemption, it is impossible. What remains is defiance. A defiance so twisted, so buried beneath chains and screams, that it scarcely resembles rebellion at all. It is not aimed at terror. It is not even aimed at the gods. It is defiance aimed at the void itself. A refusal to vanish. A refusal to be forgotten. This too is punishment, for it ensures that they cannot fade. They must march, must kill, must bleed, forever. To exist as punishment incarnate. The last punishment, then, is not one that falls upon them from above. It is one they become. They are no longer soldiers, no longer rebels, no longer men. They are punishment made flesh. They are the warning written in blood upon the stars. They are the whisper carried in the dark to every guardsman who feels abandoned, to every officer who questions his orders, to every soul tempted to turn from the Emperor's light. The last punishment of the Traitor Guard is that they endure not as heroes, not as martyrs, but as eternal reminders of what betrayal becomes. And so the cycle closes. From rebellion to vengeance, from dominion to corruption, from chains to punishment. The story of the Traitor Guard is not one of triumph or tragedy. It is one of inevitability. They rise, they fall, they are punished, and they endure. The galaxy forgets their names. The Imperium erases their histories. Their gods consume their souls, but still they march. Still their boots strike the broken ground. Still their voices echo across the void. They are the last punishment, and they will remain until the galaxy itself burns away. Perhaps in the end, that is their victory. Not freedom, not salvation, not glory, but endurance, to remain when all else has crumbled, to exist as scars that never heal, to be chains that never break, to be punishment without end. And so the story ends. Not with silence, not with peace, but with the sound of endless marching, the boots of the Traitor Guards striking against the stones of a galaxy that has forsaken them, the echo of chants to gods who never loved them, the rattle of chains that bind them forever. The last punishment is not theirs alone, it is ours. For as long as they exist, as long as they march, the galaxy itself remains condemned.